Hello, my name is Damon Rocha, and this is my Project 1 for Intro to Game Programming class. To start, I created the few rooms in this basic level, and for the materials in each room, I pulled in some materials from Quixel Bridge. Along with that, I pulled in these concrete rubble pile assets from Quixel Bridge, along with this cardboard box that's slightly damaged. I'll just show those real quick. So under the Meg scan for surfaces, here's the old wall plaster, which is the reddish color, and then worn concrete, which is the main material I used across this level. Next, I wanted to cover this BP floating enemy. So this is a blueprint actor I created that will follow the character, or follow the player. It is a child of the BP floating box, is a child of this BP floating enemy. It inherits a lot of its functionality. It's mainly all shown here in the event graph. So I'll start with the event tick. Every tick on the editor checks to see if it should chase the player. And if it not, it just will do this chase debug message, which is default just hello. But if it should chase the player, it will add this actor world offset, which is like it takes the actor's location and subtracts it from this delta location, which is just another way of saying change in location. So to get this delta location, get the player pawn's location vector, and then this actor's location vector. We're going to find the difference of the two. Then the resultant vector of that operation is normalized, just turns the value of that vector to 1 in the direction that it's facing. Then we multiply it by the speed. Can be set by the designer, so this is a variable. And we take this speed and turn it into its frame rate independent by multiplying it by this delta seconds. So it's going to move at that same speed no matter how fast your processor is, and then plug that into that location for the actor world offset. Then if this component, the static mesh, so here it is the box, but for the floating box, it would be the cardboard box. So if that is hit, it checks this actor and tries to cast it to this BP first person projectile, which was included in the starter content. And that just tries to transform this reference to this actor into a BP person projectile. And if that doesn't work, there's this cast failed pin, but I'm not doing anything for that right now. But if it does, we go and set enable gravity on the static mesh component to true. So before it'd be floating, and then once it's shot, it will enable the gravity, which will hit the ground. And then it spawns this emitter, which is a particle effect. So for here, it's a smoke effect, which is actually a variable that designers will be able to set in this editor. So like I can just click BP floating box, and since it's a child of floating enemy, it has all of these same variables that are exposed to be changed. So like we have the speed that we talked about earlier, which should chase player, debug message, hit emission, and then I'll go over these max hit count and explosion emission next. So it then goes into the sequence node, just runs these step by step. So run this whole thing, and then no matter how it ends, the next thing it runs is this part. We'll start with the top part. So we take, if it's shot by the BP projectile, it'll add to its hit count, which is set to 0, and this is actually hidden from the designers and the rest of Unreal, just because the only person that really needs to worry about this is this character, which is an example of the encapsulation. And then it takes this max hit count, which can actually be set in the viewport, and it'll see if that's greater than the hit count's greater than or equal to this max hit count. If that's true, it blows it up. If it's false, then it'll just print how many times it's been hit. Then once that's all finished, it goes into this delay, which is just like a wait. So it keeps the box on the ground for, currently we have 2 seconds. But if you wanted it longer, I exposed this, or actually haven't exposed it. Now it's exposed, this floating delay, so that way it can be changed. Then after this delay is complete, it disables gravity and adds an impulse, which is just an upward force because this is in the Z direction on the static mesh component, so it starts floating again. And I think the only other things left to cover was this box collider. If the player overlaps with this box collider, which is why it's casting to this BP first-person character, then it'll explode. But it won't explode for anyone else because if this other actor cannot be set as this BP first-person character, it'll get this cast failed pin, which is doing nothing right now. Lastly, this explode function will spawn an emitter at the location, and it's this explosion emission, which can be set again in the viewport, and it just sets this right at the actor's location, then plays a sound at the location and destroys the actor. And that is it for the floating enemy. Just to prove that I didn't go through and redo this in the floating box, the event graph for floating box is fairly empty other than the default nodes and this parent tick, which all this does is says, so I want you to run the tick of your parent instead of your own. So like if I disconnected that, it would do everything that is happening in this tick event. And I think that's it for the actor, the blueprint actor. Then for this spawn, BP spawner, this component it enables input from the player controller. And if the P key is pressed, it will spawn an actor. And it goes to this spawn actor custom event I created. And what this does is it spawns an actor of this actor type of spawn that can be set in the editor. So I have this, let's see if I can find the spawner. Okay, so I have this BVP spawner, and it takes this actor type of spawn, which is right here, and then it also takes in an array of these spawn points, which array is just like a list of these items, and it uses these spawn points to determine where it wants the spawn to happen. So what I did was I take the spawn array, which is of this spawn location class. I get the length of it and subtract it by 1 to get the maximum random integer. Then I use that random integer from 0 to the max minus 1 to get the actual item, and then I set that as I get the spawn location from that and set it as the spawn transformation. And for the spawn location class, it literally is just gets the location of the actor and sets the spawn location. And then this is exposed for anyone to change. I might not do that in the future because, like I was thinking this through earlier, if someone went right in here and they changed this spawn location, it might cause some, and it might mess some things up. I'm hoping not though, because it's at begin play, it just sets it to whatever the actor's location is. And that's it for those. Do anything in here? No. Yes. so that was it on all that. Let me see what else I need to cover. I got abstraction, inheritance. Okay, so I can real quick cover inheritance. So and polymorphism. So an example of inheritance that I created was this BP floating enemy. And what this does is all the functionality that is in this class is also available in its children. So like in the future, I could have not only a floating box, but I could also maybe like have a floating rubble pile or a floating cube or something else, or a floating orb. And all I'd have to do is create a child class. Another example of inheritance that's in the editor at all times, or for most of the time, I should say, is the player character versus pawns versus actors. So an actor would be the parent class, and the pawn would be a child class of actor, and then a character would be a child class of pawn. And each of those share a lot of the same functionality, but each one adds its own custom functionality that the parent didn't necessarily have, but they all share a certain thing. So like, since this is an actor, this floating enemy, it's going to have this get actor location, and the player pawn, or get actor location, but the player pawn, it's a pawn, and it's going to have this get actor location. And then for encapsulation, so an example of that would be this floating box, or floating enemy. So we put together all of the important functionality, variables, and everything into this class that it needs to run. Then we only expose the values that the anyone designing or just trying to change stuff in the editor would actually need. So they're not going to need to know every little piece of how this works. All they'd need to know is these variables that they could change the functionality. And that kind of ties also into abstraction. So the class holds all the information, but it also abstracts away anything that isn't necessary for it to run or for someone to interface with it. And then lastly, polymorphism, again, similar to inheritance, but a little different. So like, for example, if I did this floating enemy and I created another, like I was talking about before, BP floating door, and went into here, and we'll change this to door. It's going to be weird with the box and everything, but now it's a door. And then I can also change some of its functionality. So this floating enemy, what can I change? So let's say when it overlaps, instead of exploding, when it overlaps with the player, instead of exploding, we could just make it stop chasing the player. So we'll override on component and overlap. And then this version of onComponent begin overlap will run instead of this version. And what we'll do is, again, cast it to the first person character. And then if that works, I'm going to that should chase player to to false. And after covering that, I'll just give a quick walkthrough of everything in the game. So let me real quick check this. Vector path, movement, variables, base, collision triggers, action. Okay, so I think that's pretty much everything. So let's just real quick walk through all this. So I'm going to restart that and actually see what happened to the door. Okay, so I didn't do it correctly. Let's look at this one. So on component, we can overlap box. Let's put this in a function. I will call it handle player flap. And then instead of doing all this, we'll go override handle player overlap. We're going to remove the parent version, and it'll pretty much be the same thing, but as to first person character. Then if it's the first person character, we're going to set should chase player to false. Let's see. There we go. So it stops chasing me, but the box still blows up. And let's just remove that for now, because I don't really have anything else for that. So just give a quick run through of what I have so far in the game, and then we'll be done. So I'm using this starter gun that was already in the game. And for now, shoot the boxes 5 times. It will die. They'll float away, but if I hold X, the gravity is enabled. If I let go, gravity is disabled again. If I hit P, boxes spawn in random rooms. And then again, hold X, disable the gravity. As long as I'm holding it, they'll just slide towards me. If I disable it, there's an impulse added that starts to float. And then they blow up once they're hit 5 times. Right now, I haven't figured out how to get it where they don't get stuck in the rooms, but someone can just go through and find all the boxes. Maybe eventually I'll turn them into like targets or something that actually chases the player. And that's about it. I don't have anything else. I'll just go through and spawn a whole lot of these and then we'll be done. Okay, so let's do some more. And then hopefully none of these get stuck. Alright, and then holding X, they all come crashing down. And then let go, they start floating in. Just realized that my what I do to make them float and not float actually broke them hitting the ground whenever they're shot functionality. So I'll probably go through and remove that. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.